Tonight on Real News from the Blaze, the president is offended by the notion that national security leaks are coming from the White House. Will Cage.
Well, wherever they're coming from, they keep coming. Whether it's the New York Times or Newsweek magazine, we keep hearing more and more interesting details about national security issues. But is that a good thing? We'll talk about that tonight.
All right, all that and much more on Real News from the Blaze coming up in just 60 minutes.
Hello, America, and welcome to the Glenn Beck program. And this is the network that you are building, GBTV, and I thank you for that. It's been a long week. We have gone over a lot of different things to try to prepare each of us for the future. And the future is bright as long as we make it that way. I've asked you to commit, to activate, to live it, and to create. Tonight I have a story that I can't wait to share with you, an update on a story, if you've been following this show for the last few years, that you're going to love. But I want to start here. About 3 months after I was in Washington, D.C., on August 28th, I got a box. And in that box was a note that said, "Our family felt that you should be the steward of this." We were there on 8/28. And I went through the box, and at first, the only thing I saw in the box that I recognized was this Purple Heart. This took me about a year to actually preserve the proper way. And I've never shown it on TV before. In fact, I've never even hung it on a wall. I have it on an easel in my office. I keep it right by my desk because I find it to be so powerful. On August 31st, 1967, Commander Hugh Stafford was taken, and he was taken to the Hanoi Hilton, where he was pretty brutally tortured. He spent 6 years in prison in Vietnam. And he was afraid he was going to lose himself. So the first thing he did is he wrote down everything he could in a journal. This journal is one of the most amazing journals I've ever seen. This is just 2 pages of the journal. Behind here is the original journal. And it has 1 page, just how to rewire a house. This is everything he knew about the human reproductive system. He wrote everything he could so he could constantly go back and never forget what he knew about being human and what he knew about being Hugh. These pieces are actually just old cigarette wrappers. He would get a pack of cigarettes once in a while, and he would cut it open very carefully, as you can see, and then he would write in very small handwriting his thoughts. These 2 pages are about judging others. Now remember, here's a guy who's having horrible things done to him, and in these 2 pages he says, no matter how bad things get, no matter how bad people are to you, never judge them. Over here, he wrote, looking back, "I will always wonder how I endured it all. Not just prison, but the return. The crowning day will come when all of it will be past, and I can say, after that, I fear nothing but God." This one is all about how afraid he was of being released because people would have moved on with their lives. He had been in prison for 6 years in hell, and he wondered, how am I going to feel when I get home and they all have a life without me? How am I going to feel? These are just amazing pages in a man's life, and this is one that I took out separately and I framed before my desk, I have read this so many times, and I'll share it with you later on in the broadcast. There are people that have risen so far above and beyond what we think we could possibly endure. I want to bring back a couple plus one that you have met on this program several times before. Stephanie and Christian Nielsen. They are not survivors, they are thrivers. In 2008, Stephanie and her husband, Christian, were in a serious plane crash. Christian suffered burns over 40% of his body. Stephanie suffered even worse. She was on the brink of death with burns over 80% of her body. Here's a woman who has endured a journey that most of us couldn't even think about. But I'm guessing after all of this, she has nothing to fear but God. This week we have been laying out a plan to be better Americans. It's a 4-step process. Commit to it. Activate yourself and the loved ones around you. Live your principles and create. Yesterday we focused on create, which is a way for me to find joy and happiness in life. Stephanie and her husbands have created Charlotte. Since last time we saw you, you were pregnant, and weren't they going to take the skin off of your stomach, right?
The burned skin, the plan was, since my stomach was burned, that they were going to cut the burn off and use the stretched stomach that I created with Charlotte, and now I have a pretty awesome stomach. So.
It's true. I think it's true. I think these guys embody every single one of those verbs. They have created a beautiful family together. We'll get an update on that. She committed to her recovery, as did her husband and well-being. They actively live their life as an example of the change they want to be. They bring joy to everyone around them through their creativity. And she has a blog with millions of followers called NiniDialogues.com. She also has a new book called Heaven is Here, and thousands of journal entries. I don't know if they're an awful lot like this, but I'm guessing some of them are. She started journaling when she was 8 years old. Her journal served as the basis for her book. We went out to the Nielsen home and got the thoughts of Stephanie on the importance of keeping a journal. Watch.
I am Stephanie Nielsen, and I am not my body. Keeping a journal is an important part of your family history. We have taught our kids so many neat stories from journal entries that past men and women have written, hard times, things that they've learned. Some of our favorite stories come directly from our ancestors' journals, and we like to read them for bedtime stories. I feel like learning from our past, especially those that we came from, is really important, and I want my children to know who they came from, where they came from, and the important lessons that they've learned, and how we can avoid some of the things that they did, because they went through it and it was a bad choice, and this happened. And so what would we do, and how can we change our lives? I'm a big journal keeper, and I encourage my children to write in a journal, and I wanted them to write all of the fun things that they did. And so they decorated it, and they drew pictures, and they take it with us on trips that we go on, and put little things in it. Claire taped a bunch of leaves from a trip. What else do you like to write about in your journal?
I like to write poems like that.
My daughter Jane taped a flower that she had pressed for my grandfather's funeral. I also keep journals for all of my children from a mother's perspective, and I write them almost every Sunday. I try to write in them. And just, this is what you're learning, this is how you're acting, this is how you act towards your sister when she gets mad at you, or, just things that I notice that I'm keeping for them. And my goal is to present it to them when they get married or go to college or go somewhere, hopefully that I'll write it as long as I can until until they're ready to move on, and then their children can read it and see what they're like. I write a personal journal. I was always a big journal keeper, and I started a journal as soon as I could write after my accident. And there's some things in there that I'm so grateful I have, just some lessons that I've learned and things that I've forgotten, experiences that are sacred and spiritual that happened to me that I'm grateful that I wrote down. And so I continue to write in my journal for my children, really.
Welcome to the Nielsen's. I'm glad to have you guys here.
Thank you.
Katri, we're going to start with your question because it is right where I was thinking when I watched this, and you said you wrote some really intense things in your journal.
Well, my question is, how do you find the line between how much to share? I guess, you know, because there's some things that are kind of personal, and you mentioned sacred, and so how do you find that line?
For me, if I feel good about it, if I pray about it and I feel good, like it's something that I am willing to share with others, I feel like these experiences have happened to me for a reason, and that reason is to share with people. Hopefully it's helpful in others' lives. There are, like I mentioned, lots of things that I don't share because they're so personal and sacred to me that I just want to keep that way.
What was something that you wrestled with that you put in the book that you thought, I just don't know?
There are two things that I wasn't sure about. One was my relationship with Christian again, becoming physical with him again, and learning how to rekindle our relationship and our love, and that was tricky. And then the other thing was
tricky. In just because it was so deeply personal, and
because it's so personal, but it was such a big part of our story was learning who we were again. And
I love your statement. I just think it is the greatest statement from a woman I think I've ever heard. I am not my body. I love that.
And it took me a while to get there.
I bet it did.
And once I did get there, I was able to share that body again. And it was hard. It was difficult. And the other hard thing was to write about where I was during my coma, where I believe I was, and who I was able to meet and talk to, my grandmother who passed before, and others. And
share a little
people
of that.
think you're crazy when you talk about things.
Get over
like
that.
But I know that I was saved, and I saw my grandmother the day of the accident. She helped. I don't think I physically saw her. I felt her. We talked. We communicated. She helped me, and then on.
Hang on before you go there. Stop on it just a second. You say, I don't think I physically saw her. I felt her. What? Describe the experience.
When the accident happened, I was in this burning airplane, and didn't think I was going to get out. And so I just said, okay, I'm going to just give myself to this, and it's going to hurt. I'll die. I'll be somewhere else. And I felt like she came to me and said, you know, you're not giving up, and this is what you do. And I felt like my hand was guided to take my seatbelt off, and she told me to roll on the ground and extinguish the flames. And I know she was there. I felt her.
In reading the book, there's a part with your brother where your brother comes in and everybody is praying for your recovery, and he's not. You want to tell the story?
Yeah, he didn't want to see me suffer. He thought it would be better that I die. He was basically praying that I would just quietly pass on. My brother and I have always been close, and I think he just was scared. He was scared to see my life unfold. And after the accident, they were introduced to many other burn survivors, and lots of them were people who were suffering and were living a life of sadness, and he didn't want that for me. And so his prayers were opposite, that I would move on.
How do you feel about that?
I felt the same way. I mean, there were times when I wished that I would have just kept, just would have gone on as well. So I can't say I don't blame him, but, there came a point where he said, too, how grateful he was that didn't come true, and it really helped him gain lots of faith, and it helped him in his life as well.
Kristen, do you ever feel that way?
I never felt that way. I was on the other end of the spectrum. From the very moment that I awoke from my coma, was praying for Stephanie's full and complete recovery. And not that...
How long were you in the coma again, or refresh my memory?
5 weeks.
5 weeks.
Was my first memory. But I from the very moment I could utter a prayer, it was to get hope and pray that Stephanie would be well again, and that our family would be restored, and we'd be all back under one roof someday. And nobody knew what that would look like.
One of the hardest parts of the story is your children, and one of your children embracing and being totally cool, and one of your children going the opposite way. Will you tell that story a little bit and give us an update on where that is?
Well, when I came out of my coma, the first thing they wanted me to do was to, look at myself, and that was one thing that I wasn't ready to do yet. And it was, okay, today's the day. You need to look at yourself because it's time to see your children. You need to.
How many days went by that you were awake and aware before you could look in the mirror?
It took about 5 months, probably.
You didn't see yourself for 5 months?
Oh, no. I saw my legs, and I thought, if my legs look like that, I don't even want to know what my face looks like. It was just too...
Could you touch your
too
face
horrible.
at that point?
No, I couldn't. I didn't know. And I knew something was wrong by the way people looked at me. And they would talk to me like I was a little girl, I knew something didn't feel right. So it took me about 5 months to look at myself, and then about a week later, my children came to see me. And
how'd you feel when they came?
it was awful. It was horrible. I didn't want them to come. My sisters surprised me and brought them anyway, because I was pretty stubborn. And it was a good thing and it was a bad thing. I think I don't like to look back on my accident in any way and say, oh, that was a bad idea. Why did we do that? It was just the way it was, and it's turned out. So, but my daughter Jane came in. She came in the first, most excited to see me, and I'll never forget the way she looked at me. It was, her face went white, and she looked at the floor, and she wouldn't look at me again. And I was sobbing in my bed, and she kept looking at Christian and would ask Christian questions to ask me, and I kept just saying, just listen to my voice. It's the same voice. We'll just get through it that way. And
what did you say to her to prepare her?
We did our best to explain that things were very different now, but it was hard to describe Stephanie's new appearance without, adding on to it. But she's still your mom, and she still loves you, and she's alive, and this is a miracle. And but I just don't think that ever. We did our best to prepare our children, but
in our society, in the time that I've known you, you look radically different.
Yeah.
You look fantastic.
thank you.
And the first time I saw you, and how long had it been since you had been in the accident?
Barely
Like
2 years.
2 years?
A year and a half.
In our society, if you're this big,
Yeah.
no offense, but you'd be a monster.
Right.
As a kid, you'd be a monster.
Yeah.
They wouldn't recognize you.
And I knew that. That's why I was so scared. I was so frightened for my children. And I was worried myself, but more I was worried that I didn't want my children to have to grow up and not want to bring their friends over, or, be scared to introduce their mother to people. I didn't want to be
How is it now?
that way. And now It's so awesome. In fact, one of my favorite stories is I went to school to take my son his lunch, and his friends looked up at me and said, "What is wrong with your mom?" And he was like, "She's pregnant, duh." Like, I don't see anything. What are you looking at? You know, and that's their attitude.
You know what's amazing? When you first walked in a couple of hours ago, and I saw Charlotte, I thought, you will always look just like her mom.
Yeah.
That's a miracle.
I love it. I think about that all the time. I'm so grateful. Yeah.
Back in just a second.
We wanted to have another baby before the accident, and the accident happened. And then after I came out of my coma, that was one of the questions that I didn't want to ask, but I really wanted to know is it still possible for me to have a baby? And I don't think I asked the question for months. I was too scared to know the answer. And then finally I just wanted to know, and I asked, and they said, "We don't, I mean, your stomach was burned, but we don't see why you couldn't have another baby."
It's amazing. Our sponsor this half hour is FreedomWorks. Drowning in red ink, unable to pass a budget, ignoring the pleas of its citizens, our government is ripe for the kind of citizen revolt FreedomWorks President Matt Kibbe unveils in his new book, Hostile Takeover. Our friend Matt is the best-selling author of Give Us Liberty, a Tea Party manifesto, and his much-anticipated follow-up, Hostile Takeover, is going to hit the bookshelves on June 19th. I read this in manuscript form, I don't even know how many months ago. It is really good. You can be among the first to get a sneak peek inside the provocative new book right now by going to HostileTakeover.com right now and receive your exclusive excerpt of Hostile Takeover before it's publicly released. Go to that website right there and do it now. Back in a minute.
Bringing a firearm into your home is one of the most important decisions you can make. If you are considering gun ownership, CheaperThanDirt.com is here to help you make a responsible and informed choice. We understand it is a personal decision how you choose to protect your family. We offer thousands of choices of firearms, ammunition, and accessories to suit your individual needs. Be responsible, be proactive, and exercise your Second Amendment right. Find us online at CheaperThanDirt.com. That's CheaperThanDirt.com.
Thinking of buying window blinds from a jack of all trades?
Take a right at the garden gnomes, then a left at the squirrel feeders. You'll see some store maps. That should guide you to where the blinds are located.
At Blinds.com, all we do is blinds. Our experts help from selection to installation, and for a lot less than retail. For a limited time, use code GBTV for an additional 10% off already discounted prices. Blinds.com.
Hi, I'm Joe Gray with the Gojo Hands-Free, the only device on Earth that's truly hands-free. These things are not hands-free. You stick them in your ears, gross, but you still have to hold your phone. And these are not legal for hands-free driving. The Gojo goes on in 1 second. Hello? 1 Mississippi. Hey Mom, I can't talk right now. And it works with all phones. Flip phones, cordless phones, even landlines. And pop it off. Any phone, big or small, even the most radical moves won't knock it off. The Gojo goes on with 1 hand, so you can keep your eyes on the road. I love it.
It's true hands-free.
Call now and I'll send you 2 Gojos for just $10. And I'll throw in my Super Grip mat absolutely free. It grips and holds your phone, music player, or anything else you can think of. Call now and I'll double the entire offer. Just pay processing and handling. That's 4 Gojos and 2 Super Grip mats for just $10.
To order for $10 plus processing and handling, call 1-800-493-0575 or order online at gojohandsfree.com.
Mortgage lenders lied. Banks cheated and committed fraud. If you believe you're the victim of lender negligence, greed, or corruption, if your home is worth less than what you owe, if you're currently in or facing foreclosure, or if you have a sale date, 1-800-513-0934. Our job is to dramatically lower your mortgage balance or lower your interest rate to just 2% fixed for life. Take action now. When you lose your home, it will be too late. 1-800-513-0934.
Coming up on Real News, cities all over the country are following New York's lead and getting ban happy. Buck, what's going on?
Well, the nanny state is encroaching all over the place. They're banning all kinds of stuff. We're going to take a look at what some of the stranger ones are and then get into the discussion about, can they do this, should they do this, and are we going to see more of this?
All right, that's up next. Real News from the Blaze right after Glenn at 6 o'clock.
My appearance had changed the most, and women are, you know, we're very conscious of what we look like, and we want to look beautiful all the time. And so I was really nervous to see him, and I was worried that he wouldn't love me. He'd always loved me, but not the type of love that he had for me before. And so it took a while for him to tell me that none of that really mattered. And for me, actually, it didn't take him a while for him to tell that to me. It took a while for me to believe it. But once I grasped onto that, then it's so true. It's how every marriage should be. It's what keeps you together. It's what, you know, keeps marriages alive and healthy.
This is going to sound so counterintuitive, but do you know how lucky you guys are?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, it's really amazing that you found each other, that you made it through this. Most people would not be able to recover from this. It would destroy them. And look at you, you're sitting, you're missing something, a feeding apparatus of some sort. You're sitting here with a brand new baby.
I know, I'm so lucky.
Very
I really
lucky.
am.
Jennifer, you have a question on pregnancy.
I did. My question was, describe your experiences with pregnancy before your accident and then after. I can't even imagine the emotions that you must have had. Joy, anticipation, all those things, but also at the same time reconciling that with fear and anxiety of being pregnant after the accident. And how did you wrestle with that and deal with that?
You know, I was before I got pregnant, I was really worried to have another baby. I didn't know if my stomach could handle it. I didn't know if my body could handle it. But after I got pregnant, I felt nothing but peace. I felt like this was the right choice. This was the right thing. I knew it wouldn't mean that I would be pain-free. And of course, as with all my pregnancies, I got sick right away, and I get pretty nauseous. And that's, you know, I thought, well, maybe I'll get lucky, and God will
Maybe the Lord will say, you know what, I've done enough.
That's right. Not so much, but it just makes them all that more worth it, I say. But yeah, I was very, going back to the hospital, I had to have the baby at the hospital because of the reconstruction work we were going to have after. And going to hospitals always make me really anxious and worried, and I was nervous to go back and be in that familiar setting, back in a hospital gown, back in a bed. Usually I go to the hospital and have work done and go home with bandages and pain, but this time was different, and I got to go home with a baby, and it took away so much of that pain and anxious feelings, and you know, I look back on it now and I just think I'll do it again in a second. Going through it, Christian will tell you, maybe not quite that. I complained a little bit at the end. My skin wasn't stretching and it was very painful, but I got that.
Can I ask you, and maybe it's just because I'm so far outside that I don't get it, but it seems like a new start. Not that the old has gone away or anything, but this is a new child. Is, I mean, it's a rebirth.
Yeah, I know we're looking at it that way, right? Do you want to?
And
talk?
she only knows us as
what you are.
After the accident. So our appearance to her is very, you know, it's only going to be one thing. She has nothing to compare it to.
But I want to make sure that her childhood and her life is like my other children's, which is, you know, I hope a good childhood. I don't want this accident or any physical problems that I have to get into the way of my mothering. I
gotta believe that it has done the opposite. Would your kids say that? I mean, because you're too humble to say. Do you think this has made her a better mother?
You know, she was a pretty good mother before the accident too. So, but you know, there's been some things that through this experience we really treasure, and those teaching opportunities and learning opportunities for our children and us as a couple are, you know, priceless.
You know, I've said this before, and I really mean it, that I've felt so blessed from this accident. I've been given an insight, incredible insight, and incredible lessons that I've learned from this accident, and I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful to have it, and I think that's just enhanced my motherhood, my style of teaching my children, and hopefully to help them become better little people.
I have to tell you, I've met some pretty amazing people. I've met presidents, I've met captains, titans of industry. I've met the whole range. You two are two of my favorite people I've ever met. You're just so unbelievably inspirational and remarkable. You just give me so much faith that... My father said to me once when I was a kid, he said, "There is no bad. It's only what you do with it." And you are proof that that's right. That the Lord is not ever punishing. He may correct you from time to time, but this isn't a punishment. This is a tragic thing that has happened. It's a hard thing that's happened, but look at the miracle of it.
I know, and you only live life once, and so you might as well take whatever is dealt you, given to you, and do what you can for the best. That doesn't mean I don't...
Amazing. I still
cry.
Aren't you just like looking at her going,
no.
Who are you?
I still complain. I still have my days, of course.
I bet you do. I bet you do. We're going to do another show you don't know about. We're doing that later. Let me go to Tara. Where's Tara? Tara, you had a question about traditions.
Yeah, I would just like to know some of your family traditions. I just admire your guys' ability as a family to, you know, come together with this, and I think it's important and just to know some of the things you keep as a family that you do together to stay close.
Traditions are a big part of my life, and they were when I was little, and that's what made such an idyllic childhood for me. And so I wanted that for my family and my children. And before the accident, we were big into celebrations, and every holiday was so fun. But it's been after the accident that we've looked for opportunities to celebrate, or anything we can do to make things big deal, because this is life, and family. I think family life is so important, especially to a child, and I want my children to want to be home. I want them to always want to be home, even when they're teenagers. I want the gang at my house. I kind of want to control that. I want them to want to be with me and Christian, and think their parents are people that they can look up to, and I want my daughters to be mothers, and not just mothers, but really good mothers. And I want my boys to be fathers who are like their father. I just think it starts at home. It starts with the family. And so anything I can do to create that is how it's going to happen, and that's where the traditions and the celebrations and things like that come in.
Christian, let me ask you a question. As you say, you want your boys to be a good father and a good man. What are you doing with, you have such an amazing story to tell, or just example. Your story is so important in a world full, again, I be delicate here, in a world full of lust. You are teaching love. And I don't think, I mean, that is God-given. That is something that all of us strive for, and it's not anywhere in our society. Our grandparents, I mean, my grandmother said to me, I remember growing up, she said, your grandfather and I love each other. We don't always like each other, but we love each other. And I never forgot that. And you don't see love disconnected from lust very often.
What's not to love about her, though? I mean, she's easy to love.
But what my question is what role do you have now? What do you feel that there's a special calling for you to teach this? Because it's not being taught to men.
I do actually. And Stephanie and I speak about this often. And I do feel like I'm in maybe an extraordinary situation where, well, I know people who, if, not that we're so great, but I know people that wouldn't have fared as well as we have, their marriage.
How many, and no judgment here on this, because this is, but how many, we'll blur your faces, how many people here could speak with absolute certainty to say, our marriage would survive this? Not necessarily based on anything other than just the trauma of all of it. How many here, raise your hand if you say, I'm certain we could make it?
Oh, good.
Good for you.
Wow, good for you. Good for you. Good for you.
Glenn, I volunteer with some young men in my neighborhood. And this is
Hold
a concept.
on just a second. I got news for you. That would not, the Texas audiences amaze me. That wouldn't have happened in New York City. That wouldn't have happened in New York City. Anyway, go ahead.
So I work with some young men in my neighborhood, about a dozen, 12-year-olds. And this is a concept, they're going through a phase in their life where they are bombarded by a variety of things that, to introduce lust and some of these things that are companions to the changes that are happening to a 12-year-old boy. And I think I feel honored to be able to talk to them with some level of authority to tell them that there's something beyond what the world is teaching about relationships between a man and a woman, or a boy and a girl, when Stephanie and I started off.
What is it?
It's that deep love, and you mentioned God, that it's a God-given love. And that's how I would describe Stephanie's and my love. We started off the right way. We believe that the way that we approached marriage and the creation of a family was in the right order.
Which doesn't always happen anymore.
Yeah, and it's not always celebrated either, or rarely even. But we felt like we did things the right way. We dated. We knew that both of us knew we wanted a family, and we wanted to love a spouse, and we wanted to create a family, and we fell madly in love with each other and have been that way since. And we had this serious, event that was a fork in the road. It could have changed things, and there were people who counseled us, said, just so you know, burn survivors rarely stay together. This just kind of preparing us for the inevitable divorce that was
I mean, I have to tell you something. Have you guys ever remodeled a house?
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah, don't do it. If you've never done it, don't do it. I lived in Connecticut. I learned when I moved to Connecticut, quaint equals crap. Don't do it. Just the amount of people that get divorced, again, it has nothing to do with anything other than
superficial.
Yeah, but the trauma, the way people, your lives turn upside down.
And sometimes we have arguments and we're like,
really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is so stupid.
Yeah.
I mean, if we can live through an accident, and I mean, we could do anything. Anything.
Back in just a second.
Right?
We get over stuff pretty easy.
The TRS Files, True Tax Resolution Stories.
My name is Gibb, and I am not an actor. As a result of my dealings with Tax Resolution Service, my tax burden to the IRS went from more than $35,000 to zero.
If you owe the IRS over $20,000 or more in back taxes, have unfiled returns, or are under audit, call Tax Resolution Services now, 888-7804-TAX, or visit taxresolution.com/GBTV.
Hi, I'm Henry Winkler, and I'm here to tell homeowners that are 62 and older about a great way to live a better retirement. It's called a reverse mortgage.
Call right now to receive your free DVD and booklet with no obligation. It answers questions like how a reverse mortgage works, how much you qualify for, the ways to receive your money, and more. Plus, when you call now, you'll get this magnifier with LED light absolutely free.
When you call the experts at One Reverse Mortgage today, you'll learn the benefits of a government-insured reverse mortgage. It will eliminate your monthly mortgage payments and give you tax-free cash from the equity in your home. And here's the best part. You still own your home. Take control of your retirement today.
Call 800-579-5009 to get your free DVD plus magnifier with LED light. Call today.
Do you struggle to read the keys on your regular keyboard? Are you constantly hitting the wrong keys by accident? Then you need Easy Eyes, the new large print keyboard that makes typing easy on your eyes. This one-of-a-kind keyboard is even spill-proof. Watch as we pour this entire glass of water over the keys. The liquid drains right out, and the keys work just like before. You could pay more than $60 for a keyboard of this quality, and you'd still struggle to see the keys. But call now, and the Easy Eyes large print keyboard is yours for only $14.95. We'll even include this matching ergonomic mouse, a $30 value, yours free. But order right now and we'll double the offer and give you a second Easy Eyes keyboard and the ergonomic mouse for the amazing low price of just $14.95. Just pay separate processing and handling. Call and order yours today.
To order Easy Eyes for $14.95, call 1-800-650-2373 or order online at geteasyeyes.com.
We're back, and I want to go to the expense of time with the audience and let you ask questions. Brian, go ahead.
My question was, how did your faith or elements of your faith help you get through this and find help or find hope in what would be sometimes a pretty despondent situation?
My faith, I was very active in my church, and I had strong faith before the accident. I think that's the key. I knew that bad things happen to good people. That there's way. I've seen it. I've seen there's ways to get out of it. There's ways to move forward. And so my faith was everything.
Were either of you ever mad at God at any time?
No.
Good for you.
There were days where I was like, oh, I don't want to do this today. Just today, let me give a break. I'll do it tomorrow, but just let me have a minute, or, things like that. But never felt
Was there a time
mad.
that you felt, either of you felt, that he was particularly close, that you felt that the veil, if you will, was very thin and you could feel that...
Almost every day, and that's why I kept going. Is because I knew what that felt like, and I knew that I couldn't deny those feelings, and I knew I could continue. I knew I was stronger than I thought, and he knew me better than I knew myself and the situation I was in, and that's how I continued on.
Glenn, I'm looking behind you at this commit thing, and there was a particular day for me where I felt very close, more close than ever in my life. And it was the day that I woke from my coma and really realized what was happening. I was told that Stephanie was in the room next door and that she was alive, but she was very sick. And that was about all that I was told. But I knew in my heart that she was, that things were really bad. And I remember having a moment between when the doctor stepped out to talk to my parents, and I was in the room alone with God. And I felt like, and in that moment when I was praying for Stephanie's recovery and just this terrible worry about our life and everything, all that physical security was gone. I couldn't even lift my arms. But there was it felt like an interview with God. He wanted to know, was I going to commit to my family, my life, and the things that it was going to be required of me to get through this and to reassemble our family.
How did you do it? How did you let him know that yes?
I was desperate. I was in a pretty desperate spot. All of that physical security was gone.
A lot of people then surrender.
I can't get my head around that. I mean, I sympathize with people who do, but when you're in that position of humility, you're in a posture to.
You're stripped down to what the essence of what you are, whatever that may be.
And if you face up to that, you're supplied with infinite hope.
Let me go to Leslie. Go ahead.
I know that both of you come from large and very supportive families, and I am so grateful for your families because of the support that they've given to you through all of this. But I wonder if people ask you for counsel and advice, that if people have been through accidents or losses and that don't have that. And I know your heart must break for those people, but what kind of counsel do you have for someone in that situation?
And it's not just tragic. I hear all the time from people in today's society where the family is split. The husband and wife are going in different directions. I hear this all the time. One watches my show, they absolutely believe it, and the other denigrates them for watching it and believing it. And it's split. How do you, if you don't have any support?
Well, we were both fortunate to have extraordinary family on Stephanie's side and my side. And in the early days, we relied heavily on our family and oftentimes it was them pointing us to God and saying, you need to trust in the Lord. Things are going to work out. And that encouragement through them was vital.
Is that what you're doing with the blog?
Yes. So when I think about my accident and how I can help others, that's how I'm helping. That's how I hope I'm helping, is writing my feelings down, is
that's what the
sharing
book is
my
about.
Thoughts. Yes. And that's, and I hope that I give others hope, and I hope that if they don't have family or a support system, that at least they know that I'm, I might not physically be able to be there with them, but that I pray for people all the time that I worry about, and that's why I blog, and that's why I wrote that book, was for that.
I will tell you that I've met a lot of people. People come to us all the time about books and about advice, and a lot of people will say, hey, I feel compelled to write this, or I want to help, and some people are sincere, some people aren't. I will tell you that these two are so amazingly sincere in their willingness to serve and to help others feel the support. It's remarkable.
Thank you.
Christy. Where are you, Christy? There. You I think, have an obvious...
Right. It's obvious, but I'm not going to lie. I was watching your video, one of your videos I saw on YouTube with my girls, and I was probably in the middle of about 6 loads of laundry, literally surrounding me. And I was watching you be a mom, and I was feeling guilty, thinking, I'm complaining about my laundry and the things. Do you do that? Do you have like normal mommy days or yes. Does that experience make you go, no? Like, that's what I wonder. Like, every time do you go, no, I'm going to be grateful for the laundry and the dirty mud prints right after I wash the floor and all of these things? Or do you just sometimes, do you struggle with depression? Are you still have normal mommy days even after this amazing experience, spiritual experience that you've been through that not very many of us have had?
When I was in the hospital and couldn't move, I longed for those mommy days, those busy, I would do 20 loads of laundry, make 50 sandwiches. I would do anything to get back to those busy, overwhelming. I'm so happy to go to sleep.
May I just say, I couldn't walk for like 6 days. I'm the biggest whiner you've ever met, and I couldn't. I threw my, I threw my back out, and I couldn't. And I was in bed, and I'm like, I can't do this. I just want to walk to the bathroom. I just want to go and hug my. And now now that I'm fine,
now you're back.
You're like,
no. So I still feel that way because I know how much that meant to me before the accident. Those were jobs that I like to do. I like to do that. It's still very hard and difficult and challenging, and there are days when I'm so overwhelmed and definitely frustrated, and that's what makes us normal, and that's how we know that we can grow. We have room to grow and room to get better. And if everything was idyllic, or I ignored things just so that I could watch my kids play, I personally, as a woman, would be missing out on a role in a job that I wanted to do or wanted to be.
Let me go to Shelley. Hi, Shelley.
Hi.
Right here in the front.
Were there times that you just wanted to give up and not go on? If not, what kept you going?
There were times at the beginning I wanted to die. I couldn't move my body, and I thought that was permanent. So I just felt like, why leave me here? Why keep going? What would be my purpose in life?
Did you ever think you would get to this point, to where you were fully functional?
No, I didn't. And it wasn't until I went home out of the hospital and and they wanted me to do therapy, and they would say to me, come in, we're going to do therapy for, 4 or 5 hours a day. And I said, I did that for a while, and I said, I can't do this anymore. Therapy for me is zipping up a Ziploc bag or buttoning my kids' shirts, vacuuming the floor. Being around the people that I love, that's my therapy. And I got home and I got better, and that's what it took.
Molly.
I wanted to know, how do you balance it all when life just seems too much? Being a wife, a mother, especially having a newborn and writing your book. What do you do to take a step back and regroup and take a deep breath?
Just letting things go. I think as women, me especially, I want to take on so much, and I have to learn to just let things go. If the dishes don't get done, then the dishes don't get done. And there's always tomorrow. And Christian's been amazing. He's picks up where I can't. And so I feel almost spoiled when I talk about it, because I feel like I've just been so blessed, and sure, it's hard and frustrating, but I really wouldn't change where I am. I'm so grateful.
I love interviewing you guys. I really
Come back
do.
tomorrow.
I love, and and I always love watching you watch her, because your eyes say it all, and it's amazing. Back in a minute. Let me share the story of one of our listeners from the radio program who took my advice and called Tax Resolution Service to handle her IRS nightmare. She admits that she had heard me talk about, hey, if you're behind your taxes $20,000 or more, or you have unfiled returns, or you're under audit, or you got any real problems with the IRS, she just blew the commercials off, but she would listen to them, and somewhere in the back of her head, they were stored. She went to work one day, and one of her employers, she had several jobs, one of her employers said, the IRS is garnishing your wages. Tracy didn't have the money. She knew that she was way over her head, and she remembered taxresolution.com. She got in touch with them, and they worked out a payment plan for her. They reduced the amount owed by 60%. She had to pay $50 a month on top of that, and that's it. And she could handle it. She wasn't overwhelmed. Don't try to deal with the IRS on your own. If you owe the IRS over $20,000, if you're under audit, if you have unfiled returns, if they've garnished your wages, please go to taxresolution.com or call 866-IRS-PROBLEMS.
Thinking of buying window blinds from a jack of all trades?
Take a right at the garden gnomes, then a left at the squirrel feeders. You'll see some store maps. That should guide you to where the blinds are located.
At Blinds.com, all we do is blinds. Our experts help from selection to installation, and for a lot less than retail. For a limited time, use code GBTV for an additional 10% off already discounted prices. Blinds.com.
Preparation, focus, hard work. It's a personal commitment. It's what drives me. It gives me the confidence to look my opponent in the eye and say, game on. Preparing for life's future challenges is just as important. Food Insurance Emergency Food Supply gives me the same assurance that I'm ready for whatever comes my way. Preparation is everything. Order today at foodinsurance.com.
When it's warm, you'd love to open every door and let fresh air into your home. The trouble is, you'd end up letting lots of bugs into your home as well. Now there's Magic Mesh, the new type of screen door that opens easily and then magically closes itself behind you. The secret isn't really magic, it's magnets. 18 magnets to be exact. When you separate them, they automatically snap back together. That makes it great for pets too, because instead of scratching and whining, they can come and go as they please. So let the fresh air in and keep those annoying bugs out with Magic Mesh, a $40 value, yours for just $19.95. But wait, call right now and we'll double the offer. Just pay separate processing and handling. You get 2 Magic Mesh curtains for just $19.95. Don't delay. Call and order yours today.
To order Magic Mesh for $19.95 plus processing and handling, call 1-800-572-9265 or log on to buymagicmesh.com.
The establishment has tried and failed to copy the FreedomWorks model. Why? Because they don't understand how freedom works. So while they were sleeping, we were planning our hostile takeover. It's about the politics of we the people. So get a copy of Hostile Takeover and learn how to take back your liberty today. Get your exclusive excerpt before the book goes on sale by going to www.hostiletakeoverbook.com.
I want to leave you tonight with this. Out of all of these papers that were sent to me by a guy who spent 6 years in a Vietnamese prison camp, he wrote this. Don't dread suffering. That only makes it worse. Anticipate it, predict it, even exaggerate it in your anticipation of it. Don't fight a neurosis or a symptom of one. It may actually be a friend in disguise, a mere symptom of a deeper disturbance rendered less severe by it. A neurosis may be actually a vital protective shield. Detach yourself from it, predict it, exaggerate it, and laugh at it. It can safely and effectively be ridiculed away, but not torn away. Try to find meaning in every circumstance. Meaning varies with the individual, and with him it varies by the hour. The meaning for a particular moment may simply be to endure that moment in a manner that you can be proud of. But be aware of false pride. Don't expect too much. Perhaps in retrospect, it will show that it was meaningful enough just to have endured, to survive, to have tried. Perhaps in the end, it will be just as meaningful to look back and say, I tried, as it would be to say, I succeeded. I find that profound, and it is the message of the Nielsen's. I want you to pick up the book, Heaven is Here, and share it with a friend who may not know Stephanie and Christian's message and what they're going through. It is, it says it right on the cover, an incredible story of hope, triumph, and everyday joy. boy, how the world would be so much better if we just had a little dose of that. Also, I want you to go to glennbeck.com and find ways in your own life to commit, activate, live, and create. We'll see you again next week from Dallas. Good night, America.
Breaking news tonight. We've got real news. This just in. Real news from The Blaze.
Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to Real News from The Blaze. We've been reading and hearing with increasing frequency some very detailed accounts of U.S. counterterrorism efforts, all of which paint a rather flattering portrait of President Obama's involvement. Well, in two surprising moves, Congress has decided, one, not to duck the obvious, and two, in a bipartisan effort, call for an investigation into the leaks. But given the impact these stories have had on our national security, should we also be investigating the culpability of the mainstream media? Will Kane.
You know, it's like you can't pick up a magazine or newspaper without finding something incredibly interesting, but also incredibly, perhaps, dangerous about our national security issues. Look, this is Newsweek, and the title here in the corner is How Obama Learned to Kill. This is a story by Daniel Kleidman about what we know of now as President Obama's kill list. And, of course, we've talked on this program about David Sanger's piece in the New York Times regarding what was codenamed Olympic Games that produced the Stuxnet virus that was a cyber attack on Iran. Stories with details, and I love this detail, like this. When President Bush was developing the Stuxnet virus, when it was being developed under his watch, his national security advisors came in and laid a torn-apart nuclear centrifuge on the table to show him, to illustrate to him, cyber attacks can create physical damage. Now, listen, I love this kind of detail from a reader standpoint. I love it. But is this the kind of thing we should be hearing? And if the answer to that is no, then why are we hearing it? And let's talk about when we first started to hear these things. Because, of course, today, as you and I were talking about, it's the lead story. People have been talking about this week. But this really started, 2 years ago. Think back to the Times Square bomber. Let's put up a timeline, and we can show you that over the last 2 years, that these kind of stories have been coming out. Now, let's remember back to the Times Square bomber, Faisal Shahzad. When that came out, his name was leaked before he was arrested. Now, where did that come from? The NYPD, from the FBI? We don't know. But it came out before we were able to get him arrested. And here you'll be able to see the timeline we're talking about. A year later, remember, details of the Osama bin Laden raid got out. Amazing, vivid details about the Navy SEALs raid on Osama bin Laden's compound. And as a result of the details and the proof that we had DNA evidence that this was Osama bin Laden, there's a doctor that remains in Pakistani custody today for helping the United States out. And then, of course, what we've seen in the last 3 weeks. CIA assets infiltrate, a double agent infiltrates the alleged underwear bomber, second plot of an underwear bomber in Yemen. Then again, what I talked about earlier, President Obama's kill list, complete with details about the so-called baseball cards that he debated who should and shouldn't be killed. And then finally, the cyber attack story in Iran we just talked about. Now, as much as we enjoy reading these things, let's revisit the question. Should we be hearing about them? Why are we hearing about that, these vivid details? Well, that's not just a question among Republicans. That seems to be a bipartisan question. Let me show you what Senator Dianne Feinstein, Democrat from California, is saying.
This has to stop. When people say they don't want to work with the United States because they can't trust us to keep a secret, that's serious. When allies become concerned, when an asset's life is in jeopardy or the asset's family's life is in jeopardy, that's a problem.
Now, Senator Feinstein said that this is the worst she has seen in 11 years. The worst meaning the most detail she's seen coming out of what are supposed to be highly secret operations in 11 years. So that's led me to say, why are these coming out? Let's connect the dots. All of these stories seem to paint the Obama administration in a very positive light. So the suggestion is these are being fed out during a political season to make the Obama administration look good. And, of course, President Obama takes issue with that, and he did today.
The notion that my White House would purposely release classified national security information is offensive. It's wrong.
Now, I think we need to start with this question. What does this jeopardize? Let's not talk about the political motives possible or not yet. Let's talk about what does this jeopardize. Now, Buck, we talked often at this table. You were in the CIA. I'm not going to ask you to share anything with us that you can't. But we certainly know that this Pakistani doctor, for one thing, is still in custody in Pakistan. That's an obvious consequence of some of these leaks coming out. But can you help us understand what danger are we running here with this level of detail reaching the public?
Well, what the mantra in the intelligence community is always protection of sources and methods. You protect sources and methods. You protect them really with your life in many cases. And that's because there's a lot of very sensitive stuff going on around the world that the public doesn't have a need to know about, but absolutely is integral to national security efforts here in this country. So what happens when you have this sort of selective information being given out to the public in these instances is maybe there's a short-term political gain from some of it. Again, the White House says they're not confirming any of this, but of course, when you have somebody on the Intelligence Committee like Dianne Feinstein saying that this is very upsetting and very bad, people can draw their own conclusions if all the information was false or not. But it's absolutely putting operations in jeopardy. It puts individuals in jeopardy. And the broader question here is, what purpose does it serve? Usually leaks from within the national security complex have to do with whistleblowing. That's oftentimes, certainly was the case, or the alleged case, I should say, during the Bush administration years, when things would come out about U.S. Intelligence operations abroad, whatever the case may have been, and they always hurt the administration. I think people are so surprised now and upset now because when you look at what's going on, you can see very clearly that these are things that do help the administration. Before we do the political
analysis really quick, I mean, help us understand what Senator Feinstein said right there. This jeopardizes our ability to work with partners overseas. This concept of kind of burning assets, of people not wanting to work with us. Flesh that out.
Well,
what does that mean?
A perfect example of this would be, during the Second World War. I mean, the Allies had decrypted enemy cable information systems. They could literally read their mail, so to speak. I mean, they knew what the communication system was, and this was absolutely essential at different points in the war. Had that been leaked out to via the press to the enemy, that could have had a material impact in our ability to fight as a country. So when you start talking about some of these things publicly, when you out them, when you discuss particularly sources and methods, and with the level of detail, I think that's what's so upsetting to people in the national security arena at this point in time, is that they're not talking about things in sort of broad stroke. They're not saying the U.S. is involved in cyber warfare generally. They're getting into these very specific details in these reports, and that can jeopardize operations. And you see this, and you hit on the bipartisan nature of this. The people who are doing this work every day, who don't talk about it, who are very quiet about it, and who view this as their life's mission, because most people that I've met in the intelligence community view it as their life's mission. They think this stuff is deplorable.
But I think you can actually take this timeline back to almost the beginning of the Obama administration, when you recall the torture memos. And President Obama had only been in office for 3 months when he released, this trove of information, the memos from the Office of Legal Counsel under George Bush, that in great detail discussed our interrogation techniques. And former Bush officials were saying this is hugely damaging to our national security.
6 former CIA directors, I think, all said that this was just
damaging.
unnecessary and damaging.
But then Democrats actually didn't necessarily criticize that action because it made George Bush look bad. But I think what you see connecting that instance with these that you've detailed is, guess who is the star of this show? And it's President Obama. Emily, what's your reaction?
I mean, I just think this should go beyond partisan lines. It's an issue of national security. People's lives are on the line. My heart goes out to this doctor in Pakistan that has been imprisoned, potentially because of some of the information that has been leaked. This kind of stuff should not happen. And I think that for whoever is gaining from it, it's unacceptable. But also, I think there's something else here. I don't see the White House as just this one monolithic group that everyone is on the same page at the same time. I think different actors are making different decisions, and perhaps some people thought it would be in the interest of the administration to leak it. Others disagree. And so I think it's hard to just say the whole administration is on board with this.
That's a fascinating angle you're exploring right there, because if we'll remember back to the Osama bin Laden raid, it was John Brennan who was kind of the point man, a lot of the detail in the Navy SEALs raid. But at the same time, Secretary of Defense, Bob Gates said, too many people in too many places are talking about too much of this operation. So you're right. It's not a monolithic concept of the Obama administration, but if it's not a monolithic concept, that begs the question, then who? right? Then where is this coming from? Because we're starting to get specific now. If it's not monolithic, then we need to get specific.
And with a piece like this, there are so many details, the ones that you discussed, that are cinematic. Who was in the room? David Axelrod in the meetings with the kill list. And when the reporter is calling, making all these different phone calls, if the White House doesn't know about it, they're not doing their job. If they're not shutting down these pieces, they're not doing their job. So clearly, at some point, you know, the buck stops in the Oval Office.
There's also a deep sense of unfairness. I mentioned the people that do this work day to day. There's a perception that if you are senior enough, particularly if you're a senior political figure, removed from these sort of activities of the national security sphere in your daily life, but have access to that information. I mean, you're mentioning some of the people that are in these meetings. They have no need necessarily to be in some of these meetings. The fact that those individuals who obviously have a tremendous amount of contact with the press may be releasing this kind of information of their own volition, while others would be severely punished, decades in federal prison, and they will do this, really goes to show you that there's a principle that needs to be upheld here, and I don't think it's being upheld by this administration.
I was kind of blown away today watching that presser where Obama came out, basically he took offense to the question about the leaks and saying, not my White House. Well, then where's it coming from? Because obviously these are very specific details that have to be coming from the White House, if I'm not mistaken, right, Buck? I mean, this has to be somebody related very tight to the White House. So he was adamant about saying, no, it's nobody from the White House. If this ever comes out and it was somebody, I think he's going to look very bad, because he wasn't saying, you know what, let's investigate this, let's look into this. He was so adamant and said, no, that's it. End the question. And that concerns me, because we should be looking into this.
And listening to that soundbite, was he using a legalism when he said no one from my White House has released classified information? So he was sort of giving them that cover that they didn't break that. Yes, they may have spoken with the New York Times and with Newsweek, Danny
Which
Clayton.
is tricky because the president decides what's classified and what's not.
Right. The president has this understood right to, there's a formal declassification process, but the president has this right to declassify whatever he sees fit. What's interesting, though, is now you have the president discussing things publicly that he may or may not have formally declassified. So there's sort of a sense of what are we allowed to talk about in public? But we didn't get to this other side, which is on the New York Times side and some of the other papers. And I just want to say that it is known that journalists have an ethical responsibility to their country not to publish certain things. And in many cases, that's national security. The fact that they did this, I think, is deeply irresponsible. It did not serve a public purpose other than to advance. I'm talking about strictly from the journalist side, other to advance.
You see, they're more at fault than the person leaking the information?
They're not more at fault, but they're at fault.
So you don't think the public had the interest in knowing that the president had a kill list and that he sat in meetings and said, hey,
I'm
let
not
me
speaking
decide?
specifically about any one case. I'm just saying, in general, the level of detail that they went into with these different processes, which the White House says may or may not be true, that's problematic.
I tend to be more forgiving of the press than I am of the administration. The press's job is to inform the public, balanced always against national security. But I can promise you, I can't promise you, I would make a strong wager that whoever's giving them this information is telling them, this is info that's already been cleared, it's fine, we can put this out.
All right. Philadelphia follows New York's lead and bans feeding the homeless. Now, there's a lawsuit. The details of the culture of no when we come back.
In 2000, the U.S. national debt was $5.6 trillion, and gold was $272 an ounce. By 2010, the U.S. debt was $13.5 trillion. Gold had risen to $1,421. Today, our government is projecting over $20 trillion of debt in the year 2016. Isn't it time? You own gold? You can't control federal spending, but you can control where you put your investment dollars. Goldline has safely delivered billions of dollars in gold to its clients for over 50 years. Diversifying with gold is a smart strategy, and it's easy to get started. Call Goldline and get your free investor kit. Be sure to ask about our price guarantee program. Use your credit card for safety and convenience, and enjoy free shipping. Call Goldline now and buy gold with confidence. Get started today with Goldline.
Okay, so has anybody actually started saving for college yet?
Oh, not me.
No, you got time.
Oh, no, we actually started.
You have?
Really? Sure. We figure you start saving a little now, or you'll borrow a lot later on.
Yeah, but how did you even know where to start? Oh, I found out about the Gerber Life College Plan.
Call now for free information on the Gerber Life College Plan. It's easy.
It's pretty much worry-free.
Well, how could it be worry-free? What if something happens with the stock market.
No matter what happens, we get guaranteed safe growth.
So when she's ready for college, the money will be there.
And it doesn't take a lot of money to get started.
For as little as $10 a week, you can start saving for college and get guaranteed growth. Just call now.
Oh, it's a life insurance policy, too.
Oh, that's different.
And if she decides not to go to college, there's no penalty, so she can use the money for anything.
We've got to get started.
Yes, we do, because you're going to college.
Call 1-800-892-3073 for your free information. That's 1-800-892-3073.
A ban on feeding the homeless in public parks sparked outrage when it went into effect last week in Philadelphia. Well, this week, churches and religious leaders responded by launching a federal lawsuit against the city, claiming that the ban violates religious freedom. Philadelphia, as you know, is not isolated in its desire to ban things. It joins New York City, which this year began enforcing a similar law, curbing direct food donations to homeless shelters, and most recently, of course, proposed a ban on sugary drinks. But while laws that seem to micromanage our lives might at first appear to be clear cases of overreach, could there be a silver lining? Buck, what are your thoughts on the city of brotherly love can't be brotherly or loving anymore, apparently?
Well, let's talk about some of the things that are lost here. As we know, nanny state, problematic. I'm guessing everybody at this table finds the nanny state to be something that, we just generally are opposed to, aren't fans of. And some of the things that we lose are things that'll affect you in your daily life. And let's take a look at, just to give you a sense of what's changing as a result of these regulations. Play that clip. Beautiful, isn't it? So some of you may recall American Beauty. There's sort of a creepy scene where he films this plastic bag for a while. Well, that is now impossible in Los Angeles, or is soon to be.
To film a plastic bag?
No, Amy, there will be no plastic bags. Plastic bags
They just don't exist.
are banned. There will be, exactly. Plastic bags are extinct in Los Angeles. So that's one thing coming up.
Looking at a polar bear.
If you are driving a delivery truck with boxes and boxes of plastic bags, you'll be smuggling?
If we're going to be completely accurate, I think you just have to pay more. Oh no, you have to pay more for paper bags. Plastic bags will be banned. And yes, you could be smuggling plastic bags. But there are some other bans. There's some other things affecting your daily life that I think are problematic. Let's take a look at some of the clothing choices that are now made for you by the state. Can we put that one up? In Chicago, there's a baggy pants ban. Can't wear your pants too baggy. Let's also.
I think that's a good idea.
I'm a fan of the culinary arts. Boom, foie gras. For those of you at home,
Fatten up those ducks.
Duck liver.
Yeah,
Matt,
Mr. Armani over here.
Matt, when you have a pig pocket square, we know you like foie gras. Man. So, but this is now also banned because the treatment of the duck is cruel to get it so fat for the foie gras. But what if you just love animals? Well, in Oregon, that's not okay. Deer feeding now outlawed in Oregon because of the explosion in the deer population there. Where's that? See, we need her to take them out. And then, of course, we've discussed recently the ban on big gulps, huge drinks, sodas here in New York City. So these are some of the things. These are some of the ones bouncing around the country. And we could go on. I mean, the list is basically endless of sort of regulations that some people may think are silly, that overreach, that don't serve a good purpose. But I would say this. My objections on the show usually are to federal overreach because under a federalist system, we can't escape that. And states do, particularly under police powers, have a lot of leeway to enact things that, may bother you, may not. I think it really does come down to the political process. If you think that some of these things are bothersome and annoying, I do. At home before people start tweeting saying, when did you become a statist? No, I don't like any of these things. But as a matter of law, I have to say that I don't think there's necessarily a problem with them. And I would also say this: sometimes the fact that you have the ability to ban these things turns into good regulations. Texas right now is experimenting with 85-mile-an-hour highways. Exciting, Will? Very exciting, right? 85-mile-an-hour highways in Texas, only possible because Texas is making that decision. And I would say that anytime you've lived in a neighborhood anywhere in the U.S. and you've had neighbors having a party at 3 a.m. that was keeping you and maybe your pregnant wife up really late at night, you're happy that there are noise ordinance regulations, that, some of these things actually can be good. So before we just say that all of them are bad, I would put out there that it's the democratic process, and you have to make the case that the nanny state is overweening and too much.
Okay, but what about the expense of having to go through the political process to roll back what I think the majority would agree are tyrannical, absurd, and ludicrous impositions on free people? For example, the sugar ban for the sodas. That Democrats apparently in the New York State House are like, oh no, now we're going to have to like pass a law to roll back what that dope Mayor Bloomberg wants to do.
I mean, look, the Bloomberg thing is kind of silly. It's not a ban. It's not like there's going to be a guy who's opening up his jacket saying, I've got some 20-ounce sodas for you here.
Well, that's a really good point, and actually that was the point I wanted to make. Actually, two. One is who enforces the rules, and two, who decides what the rules are exactly. So, for instance, in New York, there's certain drinks that are not banned. So milkshakes, because, you know, those are so healthy, are not banned, right? But soda drinks over 16 ounces, right, are banned in certain places, but not in others. Who's deciding what's okay and what's not, okay?
Mayor Bloomberg.
Right, and so who made him, you know,
He's
qualified?
a duly elected mayor of New York. That's how he made him qualified.
One person just doesn't know everything, and neither does a council. And, you know, it's really problematic when we give so much power to a small group of people to make these kinds of decisions. But more importantly is enforcement. Who is going to enforce this?
Who enforces the saggy pants? Who's going to
Yeah,
go
well,
walk around Chicago? And I agree with that too. You know, if we're going to talk about fashion, I'd ban denim coats. I mean, I have to sit next to this denim coat for an hour. I'd ban that and have him arrested.
Will
right
and I
now.
are trying to figure out if you're dressed as a maitre d' or a gangster. I don't know.
Okay, quick timeout. It's linen. And second, if we're going to talk about the pink pocket square, he didn't stop with the pink pocket square. He's got the pink pinstripe. And my friend, you coordinate. How much you want to bet? There's a pink liner. Coordinate.
Your liner has been outed.
Back to the topic at hand, if I may, Amy.
Is there an honest separation between those things which are, you know, sort of offenses to Mother Nature or, you know, are eyesores versus what is really personal choice, like what you choose to imbibe?
Yeah, look, I mean, these are, I think, excessive regulations. But the point I was trying to make before is just that if you were to curb these regulations, if you were to eliminate the local and state government's ability to enact these kinds of regulations, you'd have other problems. And that there are, in fact, good regulations. There are
What
things
about
that
the
you
soda ban, though? I mean, I think where Bloomer is coming from with this is the obesity problem, especially here in New York City. Soda, as you brought up, it's just so bad for you. It's full of sugar. So I see what his end game, I think he has, he's trying to go the right way, but you can't, if you ban that, then you have to ban candy bars, and then when does it stop?
That's the enforcement aspect.
Yeah.
But look, here's the deal. I accept your federalism premise. I accept the idea that the smaller the government, the more authoritarian it can be if you democratically vote for it.
Within the bounds of the Constitution.
However, here's my problem with the concept of the soda ban. We're not going to talk specifically about that, but as you said, it's not a ban on soda, right? It's not a ban on these things that are bad for you, which makes me even more angry, because if you listen to Mayor Bloomberg's deputies on something like this, the goal is not to stop you from drinking soda, it's to make you stop and think. Buy the 12-ounce, stop, think, buy the second 12-ounce. That's what they want to do. So you have to ask this question.
Mind control.
No, I'm serious. If the proposal was that they could put a chip in your brain to make you stop and think for everything bad that you did, would that be one that Mayor Bloomberg would embrace? If the goal is to control my thoughts, well, where do we go from here? Now, I understand I'm venturing very far down the slippery slope argument, but my point is, you're not really trying to control what I'm ingesting. You're trying to control what I'm thinking about.
Well, I mean, but that's an interesting point, but to Buck's, I suppose, we do have regulations that are to sort of control how we think about things culturally. For example, you know, we don't allow rampant nudity. We want people to stop and think before they leave the front door.
I think the conversation has to go here, and I think you brought it up. The thing is, as conservatives, as libertarians, we're not anarchists, right? The idea isn't for no laws, and people, and even on the federal level,
it's not for no regulations either.
And even on the federal, there's a federal seatbelt law. Is it a bad law?
The federal seatbelt law?
I knew I'd get you there, maybe. But
that's a tough one for me. I don't think the seatbelt law should be federalized because it has nothing to do with the federal government. But look, I would say this: if you're somebody who opposes all of these things, as I do, it's one thing to oppose them in principle. But if you're going to say that this should not be able to be put in place in the first place, I would say this. I mean, there are trash regulations. In a city like New York, we're very happy you actually have those. If you left it up to people, they would just leave stuff out on the street all week long. I mean, there are things that there's a reason. I mean, the way the founders saw this was that at a local level, local issues should be decided. Right. And I think that there's a lot of merit in that. And before we just start you know,
Lewd behavior.
we could show, we should show some videos of the anarchists in Greece. These are not people you want to hang out with.
Look at the four things that you brought up. Banning plastic bags in L.A., does that really affect you and I? Does it harmful for us? No. You know, baggy pants, it's not harmful for anybody. So that's just somebody making a choice to ban that. Feeding the wild animals, yes, because there's more deer, more accidents. You can see how it can harm somebody. If it's looking out for the best interests of the residents of that area, I could see passing crazy laws.
See, what you're doing, Matt, right now is what every person in every municipality and across states around the country need to do to get rid of things like that. They need to sit around and say, look, this is stupid. Mayor Bloomberg's soda ban is ridiculous. Let's tell Mayor Bloomberg that so it gets repealed, instead of hoping that there's no special mechanism in place to keep you. The only real mechanism we have is federal law and the Constitution to protect you at the local level.
But I think that it's not just about should we have regulation or not. Like, that's not the issue here. The issue is how do we measure what kinds of regulation at the local level are acceptable. And that's why I said I think we need to calculate the cost in terms of enforcement. Do we want to raise taxes in order to pay for a special commission to go to every the stores that are going to be subject to these bans and make sure that they're following the law? Like, that's going to cost money. Are you willing to do that? And then two, what about special interest mania? I mean, think about all the lobbyists that are going to be in on trying to use the regulations to protect them from competitors. I think we can use these metrics to determine if these regulations make sense.
Those are definitely part of the analysis and should be. The harder one to quantify is the moral aspect. What do you impose upon free people? Where do you draw that line? And I honestly don't know where we begin to have that debate. If seatbelt laws at a local level is okay, why isn't a Coke ban?
Well, I think you can also look at, is there moral hazard in how people express themselves publicly? And, not to descend into the gutter here, but we do have regulations about how people can express affection in public, for example, and local parks are not a place to do private things.
There's also,
some people would say that is not harmful to our public.
You mentioned, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, we've discussed this with unions. Who mobilizes to get political change done? Oftentimes, it's not sort of the voice of the people; it's special interest groups. But when we're talking about some of these issues, the fact of the matter is there are a lot of laws and regulations on the books at a local and state level that are just not really enforced. And they're generally not really enforced because they're dumb. And people recognize them as dumb. And blue laws all across New England, that ban the sale of this. Look, some of them are still enforced, I have to say, but some of them are kind of, kissing your wife on the cheek on Sunday is like, I think, illegal in some parts of Connecticut. But see, that's sort of the point, is that, you can also, Bloomberg, maybe he doesn't repeal the ban because everyone looks silly. Maybe he says, okay, 16-ounce sodas are okay, or whatever the case may be, So there's always that option.
And you can still sunbathe topless in South Beach. Tonight's top 3 stories from theblaze.com. They're up next.
The establishment has tried and failed to copy the FreedomWorks model. Why? Because they don't understand how freedom works. So while they were sleeping, we were planning our hostile takeover. It's about the politics of we the people. So get a copy of Hostile Takeover and learn how to take back your liberty today. Get your exclusive excerpt before the book goes on sale by going to www.hostiletakeoverbook.com.
The TRS Files, True Tax Resolution Stories.
Hi, I'm Stuart B. I'm in the insurance industry and I'm from Southern California. I faced a potential liability of $106,000. Tax resolution services settled for $9,200.
If you owe the IRS over $20,000 or more in back taxes, have unfiled returns, or are under audit, call Tax Resolution Services now, 888-780-4TAX, or visit taxresolution.com/GBTV.
Hi, I'm Henry Winkler, and I'm here to tell homeowners that are 62 and older about a great way to live a better retirement. It's called a reverse mortgage.
Call right now to receive your free DVD and booklet with no obligation. It answers questions like how a reverse mortgage works, how much you qualify for, the ways to receive your money, and more. Plus, when you call now, you'll get this magnifier with LED light absolutely free.
When you call the experts at One Reverse Mortgage today, you'll learn the benefits of a government-insured reverse mortgage. It will eliminate your monthly mortgage payments and give you tax-free cash from the equity in your home. And here's the best part. You still own your home. Take control of your retirement today.
Call 800-579-5009 to get your free DVD plus magnifier with LED light. Call today.
Hey, Hey everybody, it's a Friday, which means most people try to duck out of the office a little early and get a jump on the weekend. Well, clearly Scott Baker is not most people because he is right here in the flesh to deliver tonight's top 3 stories. Welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, I just left the actual, Mercury Blaze offices. Right. They all skipped out. I mean, it's like a ghost town. They're like gone. Now, I know Glenn's on the road and all that in Oklahoma, but there was a lot of people that.
And here we are, hard at work.
Exactly. I think that's a really good point. Hey, so we've been looking at what's going on the Blaze, and right now, if I look at Chartbeat, things fluctuating here for Friday afternoon. A lot going on, but the number 3 story just went up a little bit ago. Agenda 21. We've talked about that. Alabama kind of taking a stand, saying that we think this is, as a state, that this is a Soros-influenced UN sort of plot. We all know the reasons to be concerned about that. They're saying we're not going to comply. The second story is one that's gotten a little bit of discussion the last day or two, but it's number 1. It's actually number 2 on the Blaze right now. The Weather Channel anchor who says she was fired over her military service. And it's like she works in the reserves. She felt like, when I first saw this, I thought, she probably got demoted for some other reason, and this was probably just the more I read about it, I was like, I think this woman got shafted because she wanted to go and serve her country. She's been 20 years in the Air Force, I think, and the more I read about the case, it seemed pretty awful to me. Number 1 story I think you guys are going to talk about in a little bit, but it is the Wellesley High School teacher who got up and told all the kids,
You're not special.
You're not special. Yeah. Everybody gets up. You're so great. And it's David McCullough, the historian. It's his son, David McCullough Jr. And it's actually beyond just the headline. It's pretty insightful. It's not quite as blunt and harsh as you may think. There's some parts of it, but it brings about a really good message. I know you guys are going to talk about it. I'll kind of leave it there. And my story to boost, the one that's kind of like not in the top 5 on the Blaze right now, but I thought could be interesting to this audience. Our faith and religion section, very vibrant, and Billy Hallowell, our faith editor, has been spending a lot of the last year talking to different atheists and atheist groups. Spent a lot of the day with Penn Jillette last week. So we did a thing today where we took one of the most prominent atheist activists in the country, Todd Stifel. Stifel. And we had solicited questions from the Blaze audience, like what would you like to ask this guy? And so we have a lot of those things and his answers to them about, some of them just like, all right, you're an atheist. What's your reason for living? But others, like why do atheist groups sometimes seem to be more confrontational with Christian groups, but less so with Islamic groups? Things like that. A lot of interesting questions there. I think you'll
so it's a thoughtful conversation.
Yeah,
not just
right.
A pile on.
We don't just do shouting on the Blaze. Right. This is all about going deep.
Scott, what's more to the weather lady's story? I read that she worked for the Weather Channel, and apparently they had a policy. If you have military service, you need to make us aware of something. Is there got to be more because it's just too bad?
Well, she'd been there a good while, and she says part of it was when it was part of an acquisition. I guess the Weather Channel at one point was acquired by a larger entity, and that when investors had come in, and then they kind of tightened up the policy. But it really came down to a weekend where she was supposed to have her reserve weekend, and they wanted her to spend part of that weekend with an image and makeup consultant or hairstylist. And she said, no, I've got to go do this. And
clearly the wrong priorities.
Well, yes.
This is my weekend with my image consultant.
Right.
So I'm going to have to back out of my military service.
Yeah. Right. So we'll see. I don't know where the court will decide on this, but she seems like I would, if I were any of I would want to be like, hey, we let people serve, right? And then we make a place for them and we make it happen.
Right.
One would think. All right. Well, Scott, thanks so much for joining us right here at the table. Come back.
I'm going to go back to the makeup room now.
Okay. After the break, China and Russia wrap up a week-long series of strategy meetings, the results of which could spell trouble for the West. We'll talk about it. Stay with us.
Food independence, emergency preparedness, self-reliance. MyPatriotSupply.com. Get our survival seed vault and feed your family from your own garden for just $37.95. Our non-hybrid heirloom seeds are genuinely American, just like you. Your survival needs and survival seeds are at MyPatriotSupply.com. MyPatriotSupply.com. Self-reliance. MyPatriotSupply.com.
Like you, I would do anything to protect my family. That's why I have food insurance, the emergency food supply that guarantees my family's most basic needs, safe and nutritious food. These high-quality freeze-dried meals last up to 25 years and are compact, affordable, and delicious. Start with a 2-week supply or plan for several months, whatever's right for you. Provide security for your family. Order food insurance today.
Thinking of buying window blinds from a jack-of-all-trades?
Take a right at the garden gnomes, then a left at the squirrel feeders. You'll see some store maps. That should guide you to where the blinds are located.
At Blinds.com, all we do is blinds. Our experts help from selection to installation, and for a lot less than retail. For a limited time, use code GBTV for an additional 10% off already discounted prices. Blinds.com.
Tatler reusable canning lids, family owned since 1976. That's right, Tatler reusable canning lids. Yes, reusable with a lifetime guarantee. Made in America, BPA free. Tatler reusable canning lids, because those who can do. Get rid of the disposable lid. Go to reusablecanninglids.com. Tatler reusable canning lids.
Welcome back, everybody. China and Russia wrapped up a 2-day summit this week, following that by leading regional talks that included such observers as Iran and Pakistan. Those concluded yesterday, so what were the results? The two nations promised to strengthen their strategic ties and, according to one Chinese newspaper, quote, prevent the unipolarization of the global order. Some analysts say that the growing relationship between Moscow and Beijing represents a challenge to Western influence. Well, joining us at the table to help us out with this week's Sino-Russian Summit is Forbes contributor and our favorite, Gordon Chang. Gordon, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, so should we be correct? This is a threat really directly aimed at the United States?
Well, China and Russia have always aimed themselves at the United States, and this is really a problem. You know, most of the time, those two countries can't get together, and they really have a very difficult time. But what's changed now is that Putin, who has really been preventing the two countries from forming a really strong alliance, has sort of understood that his country sort of must bow to Beijing almost, and so he's been much nicer for the last couple of weeks, and actually the last couple of months, and I think that's why we need to be a little bit concerned. The narrative here, of course, is that at the end of the Cold War, you know, people said, well, the United States won because we pried China away from Russia, so it was 2 against 1, and the concern now is it's 2 against 1, but it's China and Russia, the 2 against the United States. I'm not too concerned because I think China and Russia are like the midgets of the of the second decade of this century. But anyway, you know, it is a concern.
So why has Putin changed his mind about this alliance? Is it economic, that China being such an economic, strength and Russia not so much?
Yeah, I think that that's what he's seeing. But that's really ironic because he's got pretty bad timing because over the last couple of months, China's been in a recession. It doesn't have growth anymore. It doesn't even have zero growth. It probably had contraction in April. May, we don't have the numbers, but it looks worse. And this is a long-term problem. So essentially what Putin did was he jumped on ship just as it was about to sink. So I think that this is not going to be a big deal for us because I think Putin will abandon ship in the not-too-distant future.
What do you think about what could the Obama administration do? There's these issues that China and Russia seem to have some agreement on, right? They don't want a replay of Libya and Syria. They're opposed to the U.S. missile defense shield. And we do a fair amount of criticizing Obama at this table. What could he do vis-a-vis the issues that Russia and China have some agreement on? I mean, what are realistic concessions? Let's just assume that he got tough and started doing that whole diplomacy thing a little better.
But, you know, I think that it is the get tough thing because it's more image. And I think one of the reasons why Putin thinks that the Chinese are going to dominate the century is because Obama has really been sort of signaled American weakness. And I know that he would say it's different, that what he's trying to do is show a more cooperative face to the rest of the world. But nonetheless, that's not the way authoritarians like Hu Jintao in China and Vladimir Putin in Russia see it. They see it as a sign of weakness. Now, they may be seeing it wrong, but that's the way they see it. So the answer to your question is he needs to find his masculine self.
Gordon, can you do this? Take us back historically. You mentioned the fact the United States pried China away from Russia, but take us back pretty far in history. What is it that kept China and Russia from being strong allies in the past, regardless? I mean, we're looking at two regimes, statist, communist goals. Why haven't they been strong allies long into history?
Well, you know, you had Mao, who never could form an alliance with anybody except for North Korea, and Stalin or Khrushchev on the other side. That didn't help. Also, you know, these two countries have been trading territories. So what, you know, we call the Russian Far East was once part of the Qing Empire, and the Qings not only ruled Russia, they also ruled China. And so the Chinese see this as Russian Far East really been part of China. Now, they've got the history wrong, but that's the way they look at it. So they say, we want our Vladivostok back. And so that's a problem.
This kept the two countries at odds for a long time. Right. But over the last, I don't know, decade or so, when we see them have kind of common interests, whether or not that's Libya or Syria, are those just issues of convenience? They both don't want the UN or the international community peeking into their own borders, so they oppose these actions, almost not teaming up, but just have the same goals?
Yeah. So, I mean, they do have common interests, and that has been true all along. But what's new now is that they are willing to act on those common interests where they weren't before.
That's the very new news here. That seems to be the what we're talking about, the Sino-Russian.
Last couple of months, I think there has been a change in view of the way Putin views it. You know, got to remember that he didn't go to Camp David for the G8 meeting. He didn't go to Chicago for the NATO summit, but he does have the time to go to Beijing for the meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is really the anti-NATO. So, you know, this is a real important signal here.
You said, Gordon, you said you're not concerned earlier. I read this, and I was here much more educated on the situation. I am concerned, not about tomorrow or next year, but to me, you know, from an economic standpoint, China is going to be a powerhouse for decades to come. And maybe Russia isn't right now, but they still have mass natural resources that China can play off, and they can kind of get a nice partnership going. Is there anything possibility down the road, maybe I'm thinking way outside the box, that their end goal is to end the United States? Is that possible?
Well, you know, look, most people in the world disagree with me about the trajectory of China. And if I'm wrong, then there's a hell of a lot to worry about. But really what I see is a China which is really plagued by problems in the economy, but more important, problems in the political system that prevent the country from coming to the natural solutions that it really needs. And so that's why I think that China will not be a strong player this century. But, you know, as I said, you know, if I'm wrong, then you're right, and we do have a lot of work to do because China and Russia together, it's a pretty formidable pair if you look at it sort of the way most people do.
What are the things, though, that keep China, what are the things that could or will keep China and Russia at odds to some degree? What are the points of friction between them? Because obviously they're putting up for the Shanghai Cooperation, they're putting on this sort of face of unity, and they're bringing all these other countries from the region, and they're saying, you know, we're sort of the alternative, I would assume, to the Western-led world. What are the things that will keep China and Russia from becoming that sort of, you know, duopoly?
Well, they compete for influence in the Middle East, especially Iran. They compete for influence in Central Asia, which is really the former Soviet republics. But more important, the things that will keep them apart will be Chinese arrogance. You know, you see in Beijing a sort of more assertive view. It's actually more belligerent and hostile, and you know that doesn't play well, even with weak countries like the Philippines, which are right now standing up to Beijing. And so you can imagine Putin eventually getting sort of say, "I can't take this anymore."
Those are some big egos.
Putin
versus Hu Jintao.
Shirtless.
Are you concerned at all about there being an overreaction on our side? Are there ways that the administration over here might see these actions and overreact?
I don't think so. I
actually love that question. We talked about whether or not Obama's being too not aggressive enough. You said I can't remember your quote, but it was strong. But I like that angle because if it's true as you contend, Gordon, that China is not that big of a player long into the 21st century, and if Russia's not either, then can't we overreact to this?
Well, except though that look. Apart from what you think about the balance of power in the world today, you've got two authoritarian states that do intend to try to change the international system. And so we need to react to that. And that's really important. You know, I think China's weak. He thinks China's strong. But, you know, whoever is right, it really means that these countries really want to change the world in ways that would make it worse. And whether we're talking about a China or whether we're talking about Burkina Faso or, you know, whatever, we need to really be alive to those types of attempts to make things worse in the world.
So, Gordon, I can see how for Russia and China dealing with Iran or Syria is really not that big of a deal. They're not going to be as squeamish whatsoever about human rights abuses or, you know, tyrants mowing down anti-government opposition. However, don't China and Russia also contend with their own terrorist threats? And why is it that we're not able to sort of get on the same page with them about at least that one mutual area of concern?
Yeah, what we do, and this is really very bad State Department policy, we look at the Tibetans and the Uyghurs and in the southwest and the northwest part of China, and we say, oh, you know, they're part of China, you know, and people there want their own freedom. And we don't say they're freedom fighters. But, you know, we're a country born of revolution. revolution. You know, we were there because we wanted to stop tyranny, you know, and essentially we're not willing to stop Chinese tyranny in Tibet or Xinjiang province. And that's really a problem because these people are not Chinese. They've been conquered. They don't want to be part of China. And Beijing is using some of the most ruthless and abhorrent tactics to keep them inside the Chinese tent. And we need to speak out loud.
With the Uyghurs being categorized as terrorists?
Oh, I mean, no. I mean, yeah, there might be a few, but really what we have is, you know, we have a state-dominated system there which is really preventing people from praying the way they want, to speaking the language that they want, from doing all those basic freedoms, you know, that we take for granted. And we can't speak out about that. I mean, sometimes we say things, but we really need to sort of live up to our ideals because there are a lot of people in China who don't want to be part of the People's Republic, you know.
So I'm sorry, you support, or you would want U.S. support for separatist movements in China and
yeah.
Right, I mean, so bold. Wow.
Like what kind of support?
Well, I think that first of all, what we need to do, some very basic things, like having the Dalai Lama. If he comes to the White House, it needs to be a formal meeting. He doesn't need to leave through the same entrance that the garbage leaves. You know, this is just so wrong. I mean, we need to do that. We need to talk about these things in public. We need to sort of try to help the Tibetan community in Dharamsala. They are so behind the curve because China is so big and so powerful.
What would the backlash be, you think, to that? I mean, obviously they are, you know, ushering out the Dalai Lama because they're afraid of how this will look to China. Do you think China wouldn't do a whole lot if we did?
But you know that China's not going to help us anyway, and if they saw that we were living up to our ideals, they might say, oh my gosh, you know, these Americans don't think they're weak. The problem is, you know, we've been telegraphing this weakness, and it's very nuanced debate about all this, but I think the real thing that gets lost is that with people like Putin and Hu Jintao, when you try to do the right thing, they don't see it as a sign of cooperation. They don't see it as a sign of goodwill. They see it as a sign that we think we're finished. And if we think we're finished, then they think we're finished.
But we kind of need China right now from an economic standpoint.
We
really
no, we
do.
Don't. No,
I
we
think
don't.
from an economic standpoint, we absolutely do. The demand of goods, the goods that are coming out of that country, if we do something that they view as unacceptable, they can easily slow down. Oh, absolutely. What percentage of the economy of the world economy is coming from China? What happens if suddenly China puts tariffs on all types of American goods? What do you think happens? And then it's a huge trade war between China, and we need them for our economy. Our economy is struggling.
How much time do we have?
We'll give you as much as we can, Gordon.
Last year, 190.5% of China's overall trade surplus related to sales to the United States. They have an economy that is geared to selling things to us.
Okay,
we don't have an economy that is geared to selling things to them. As a matter of fact, trade for the U.S. is a negative for GDP. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't have trade, but, you know, we're not a trade-dependent economy. They are. They need our markets, and they buy our treasury.
We also need their goods, though, at the same time. If you flip that around, a lot of those goods we can't get here. We can't economically make them in the United States, unfortunately.
But, you know, look.
You can set down your
manufacturers adjust. And if we're not buying from China, we're going to buy from Vietnam, we're going to buy from Mexico, and, you know, we might even buy from Nebraska.
This is a great concept.
Wow, you just turned that around to Made in America.
Fantastic. So, Gordon, do you agree with the proposition, you know, when you owe the bank $1, they owe you? When you owe them 100, you own them.
Well,
so that this, you know, debt that China owns of ours actually makes them as dependent on us as we are on them.
Well, that's certainly true. And the other thing, though, is that you got to remember that our problem is not that there are too few people willing to lend money to the U.S. Our problem is that there are too many. You remember, on the first trading day after the United States was downgraded in August of last year, there were 3 asset classes that did very well: gold, Swiss francs, and U.S. treasuries. So, you know, our problem is, look, if foreigners stopped lending us money, we'd have to take some responsible actions, and Congress, God help us.
We take our own self-responsibility. Don't have our creditors cut us off.
Yeah,
That's a strength.
I know.
That's a strength that people know that the United States is the best bet in the world.
I know, but what I'm saying is we don't have to cower in front of this notion that the Chinese own us, because
I'm with you on
really
that.
don't.
I'm with you. And they're a paper tiger. I'm with you on that as well.
All right. We look forward to part 2. Absolutely. Gordon, as always, thank you. The last visit of the week to the Island of Misfit Stories is up next.
Coming this year from Mercury Inc., President Obama calls his childhood mentor Frank, but he was so much more. a writer, an entrepreneur, an activist, and a full-fledged communist. Author Paul Kanger reveals the untold story of the communist who changed America forever. Then, a publishing first, a 10-part ebook thriller series released over the course of 1 year. From New York Times bestselling author Chris Stewart. By June, the battle will be raging, not for the Oval Office, but for our souls. It's time to find a new way forward. The Ultimate Voter's Guide from Glenn Beck. In the fall, return to entertainment with 2 groundbreaking sequels. First, the young adult thriller Michael Vey, Rise of the Elgin. And then, the long-awaited sequel to Glenn's smash hit novel, The Overton Window, finally arrives. It's a year of education, entertainment, enlightenment, and of course, the election. All coming this year from Glenn Beck and Mercury Inc.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
We're shooting in the Ivory Coast, and we're exposing a UN peacekeeper massacre of unarmed Ivorians. And we came back to our hotel room after a long day of shooting, and I walked into my room, and the room was perfectly made up by the maid, except the safe in my room was open. The money and the passport were still there. The SIM card for my phone was taken out. Under my pillow, I slept with a hunting knife because it was a pretty rough part of the world. That was gone, but there was so daintily put on my pillow a picture with a guy with his head clean blown off, as a nice warning that maybe I wasn't wanted here.
As you saw earlier in the show, the president took some questions from the press today. Well, that probably qualifies for misfit stories. Matt McCall, what do you got?
Well, this Obama presser has had me going all day. I can tell I'm a little worked up today. He took a question regarding Spain and Europe, and we have a little clip here of what he had to say to that, and then we'll comment on that.
These decisions are fundamentally in the hands of Europe's leaders, and fortunately they understand the seriousness of the situation and the urgent need to act. I've been in frequent contact with them over the past several weeks, and we know that there are specific steps they can take right now to prevent the situation there from getting worse.
Well, kind of 2 things on that. One, if they knew the steps to take right now to make things from not getting worse, hey, President, I think they'd probably take those steps right now. I mean, they don't want their entire European Union to blow up. But what wasn't in that thought was, he commented earlier and he said, for the last 2 years, he wanted to scold Europe, because of what they've done. To me, that's like an addict scolding an addict. Since he's taken office, all he has done is spent more money. He's going to scold Europe for spending too much money and getting in that situation.
Is that what he meant? Or
That's how I took this.
I wouldn't be surprised if he was meaning he would scold them for adopting austerity.
No, because he went on further, and he did discuss austerity, and he basically said there's a fine line. He backs their move to austerity, but at the same time, out of the other side of his mouth, he says he wants to promote growth in Europe. You really can't do both at the same time.
But he does have a secret plan that they could implement right now that would solve this whole mess.
Yeah, and
so kind of like
they know it too.
Gas prices.
Exactly.
He still
but they're not doing it. So I think he
okay.
should maybe share that with the European leaders.
Okay. All right. Buck?
Easy transfer into this one, Amy. We're talking about spending, Matt. Spending's out of control. Well, let's take a look at food stamp spending. If we could throw up the chart, you will see, yowzers. In 2008, taxpayers spent $38 billion on food stamps. In 2013, that figure will be $82 billion. Since 2007, the number of Americans on food stamps has skyrocketed 70% to 45 million people, or 1 out of every 7 people in America is getting food stamps from the government. This, I think, and I've spoken to a few mainstream economists on this one who, always say, don't ever cite me. But they said, food stamps is a very good indicator, actually, where the economy is, because it's a definitive number, and it tells you where things are at any given time. You can't, how many people are getting food stamps. And I think it says a lot about where we actually are right now. And I think it's also creating a sort of a new entitlement. If enough people are on something, all of a sudden there'll be just this perception that you shouldn't pay for food.
How do you take them off?
I mean, it's supposed to be a safety net. Sure. It's supposed to be a safety net, short-term thing. Mm-hmm. It's not being used that way. And, oh, by the way, fraud, abuse, and waste is skyrocketing on as well. When you're talking about billions of dollars in a program, people are going to start finding ways to play with the numbers.
Well, some welfare reform folks have said that food stamps and unemployment checks, all of this have actually been sort of the way we've shifted welfare into these other categories that aren't properly, or aren't called welfare, but properly should be. It's interesting. Emily, what do you have?
Well, as you might have heard, renowned historian David McCullough's son gave the a speech at graduation at his high school that he teaches English, and it kind of shocked parents and students because he told them that they're not special. So I have a couple of quotes from this very interesting speech he gave. So he says, "You are not special. You are not exceptional." And then he goes on to say, yes, you've been pampered, cosseted, doted upon, helmeted, bubble wrapped. Yes, capable adults with other things to do have held you, kissed you, fed you, wiped your mouth, wiped your bottom, trained you, taught you, tutored you, coached
Sounds like
you,
my weekends.
listened to you, counseled you, encouraged you, consoled you, and encouraged you again. You've been nudged, cajoled, wheeled, and implored. You've been feted and fawned over and called sweetie pie, but do not get the idea you're anything special, because you're not.
So here's the deal. I read his speech, and I think it's fascinating. I love his conclusion. I love his lesson. It's like Fight Club turned into a commencement speech. You're nothing special. You're nothing great. While that is true, I don't like what he ascribed is leading to this conclusion. He called it a hyper-competitive society that's overly focused on rewards. He might be right that we're over-focused on the trophies of the world, but it's not because we're hyper-competitive. It's because we've suppressed competition. Absolutely. It's because we've told everyone, regardless of whatever place you get, you're a winner. That's the problem, not that we're too competitive.
Absolutely. We've disentangled actions with consequences. You know, if everyone's getting a trophy if they play soccer, then it doesn't matter how well you play.
Right.
So, yes, it's absolutely a problem. And I think we've seen this a little bit in Occupy Wall Street. I'm not sure if you've seen some of these video clips, but there was one young man that had a sign that said, "Throw me a bone, pay my tuition." And unfortunately, we couldn't get the clip up here, but I'll just kind of give you a gist. NRO's Charles Cook interviewed the kid and asked, so what's your reason that we should pay your college tuition? And he said, well, it's because that's what I want.
There's a continuing and huge protest movement in Montreal, specifically on that issue.
Right.
All these college kids who are like, I should pay nothing to go to school. Somebody else. This is for college. This isn't for like primary education. People can learn how to read and add and do things like that. This is for university level.
And nor could he articulate even why he should get his college paid. So Will.
Anybody a Breaking Bad fan? TV show on AMC?
Fan.
Huge
Seen a
fan,
few
right?
episodes.
It's only one of the best shows on television.
Wow.
Well,
bold.
If you watch Breaking Bad, as apparently both Matt and I do, you would think cooking meth, while not rocket scientist, is somewhat complicated. Well, not for a lady, I believe in Arkansas. No, you would think Arkansas. It's actually in Missouri.
Wow, here come the emails.
I'm from Texas, and this is how you speak about your neighbors. For the lady in Missouri, she adopted the shake and bake theory of cooking meth, which was to take in a 20-ounce bottle of, I assume, soda bottle. Of course, that won't be a problem here in New York in the future. You won't have 20-ounce bottles. But take a 20-ounce bottle, mix it up, apparently in this shake and bake theory. And I guess as she's walking around the aisles with her boyfriend, they're making this concoction up of meth. Again, I learned this from Breaking Bad, but here's a quote from the St. Louis County Police Lieutenant Mark Cox. It had the potential to be flammable or blow up at any time. Meth is not the most stable or safe product to be cooking in your purse. But that's what she did.
That's frightening. Well, I thought that maybe she was just trying to cut down on transportation costs by just going to the supply.
Getting the products off the shelves.
Going to Walmart.
What do you need? Cold medicine.
Yeah, having been on meth raids, actually, for a story I did many years ago, it's frightening that she would be doing this. I mean, the toxic damage, explosions at the Walmart with all these other people shopping, it's unbelievable.
They cleared out the Walmart. They had to totally clear it out.
Unbelievable. So I'll go real fast. This is a story that proves that people are the same everywhere, that the Russians shot up a rocket over the Middle East, and people looking up at the sky from Istanbul to apparently Saudi Arabia thought it was a UFO. So
maybe Russia shot up a UFO.
We'll see.
What did you do with your eyes? What's that?
Yeah, I was supposed to,
We didn't get that on camera. It was
Twilight Zone.
That's all the time we have. Be sure to check in at theblaze.com for your weekend news fix, and we'll see you back here on Monday night.